Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Tyler, here with
Nick.
And you're listening to Makeshift Meeples, where we won't teach you how to play board games, but we just talk about them.
This week on Makeshift Meeples, Wingspan.
Wingspan is designed by Elizabeth Hargrave and published by Stonemaier Games, with art by Natalia Rojas, Ana Maria Martinez Yarmelo, and Beth Sobel.
In Wingspan, each player takes the role of a bird enthusiast, seeking to discover and attract the best birds to their aviary. Each bird you collect opens up a more powerful action in one of 3 habitats. On each turn, you will either play a bird into one of these 3 habitats or activate one of them. They either gain you food from the bird feeder dice tower, lay eggs, which primarily count as victory points at the end of the game, or draw bird cards, which you can later play into your aviary. The winner is the player with the most points at the end of 4 rounds.
That was a beautiful intro, Nick. Thank you very much for doing that. It explained the game very well. Very well.
Well, it's all you're doing, Tyler. It's a group effort, right?
Well, before we get started on the game, I did want to mention, for anybody that hears an echo, we apologize for our location, but you might hear some reverb.
Yep.
But deal with it. We'll change our location when we can. But we're talking about Wingspan. So, Nick, I first wanted to ask you a question. What did you think about the card layout and UI design of the bird cards?
Like the individual cards themselves?
Yeah.
So, first of all, they put a ton of information on each one of these cards. And anytime you have a game where there's so much information on a single card, no matter how big it is, I always am concerned that it's going to be done poorly. But I think they do a really fantastic job with these in communicating exactly what you need to know for this game. It looks really busy at first, but once you break down the cards, just open up, I think it's the first couple pages of one of the books explains it really well, and there's a ton of information in a standard size card for the most part that is fairly easy to recognize once you know what you're looking at. So
yeah, so on this card, from top to bottom, it's got title, which all the titles of the cards are different. There's supposed to be 170 unique cards.
Correct.
None of them were printed twice just to make more cards. But then next on the card at the top left, you got a zone that you can play them in. I think you call it a habitat.
Habitats,
right?
yeah, that's the official nomenclature for where they are played.
And then they have a cost, which is some type of food, is what they're calling it in this game. Then a point value represented by feathers, a nest type, a number of eggs that the bird can store, then an effect or an ability, I guess. Yeah. And then at the very bottom, I didn't notice this until you mentioned it, but there are flavor texts on the cards. Well, actually, I think they're
not flavor text,
scientific text. Yeah. So it's accurate. That's a lot on one card.
And I mean, there's also a very large piece of art on every one of these, too. Right. That's a very beautiful picture of an art that you would expect to see in, like, an Audubon book kind of example. Like, some really beautiful stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned Audubon. Actually, I was reading an interview with all 3 of the people that worked on this game, and I think Stonemaier said that he originally quoted that artist, not originally quoted that artist, but he said, I want the art to look like John Audubon art. That's what they went with.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I know that Jamie Stegmaier, who actually is from the St. Louis area, I believe they actually had an event at like the St. Louis Audubon Society to like preview the game and kind of bring non-gamers into an interesting board game, because this game is a little bit different in that it is about real things, and there's a ton of educational material built into the game.
Yeah, you get a lot of residual learning, I'm sure. More so than many other games.
Yeah.
Actually, I even noticed about the art, they're all hand-drawn, I think. Mm-hmm. So each bird is a color pencil sketch.
Yeah.
And then they just, as far as I'm concerned, they just took that sketch and digitized it.
I would assume so for the printing process, yeah.
But that seems crazy. I mean, I didn't know that people were still doing that for board games.
Oh, yeah.
I thought most of it was just digital art.
Well, the other interesting thing is, going along with that educational piece, you have a picture of the bird. You have the wings, the typical wingspan of the bird in centimeters or millimeters, however, depending on how big the bird is. You have information about where the bird lives. Additionally, the mechanics that bird have in the game are fairly closely tied to how they act in nature. So, like, there are various raptor birds that will essentially eat other birds and score you points during the game.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat how they used the way that these birds act in nature as part of the game mechanic as well.
Yeah, I can tell you're excited about it, Nick. It's invigorating for sure.
Well, it's very different than a lot of other games that are out right now. And I mean, this game has just sort of created its own craziness since it came out for a variety of reasons, but one of those is it's a very different game than what we typically see. You know, it's not we're going to save things and we're going questing, you know, like it's not a rehash of any genre that we've seen before, really.
Yeah. Well, getting into the mechanics of the game, at the end of the day, this is an engine building game.
Definitely is.
You use cards to build your engine. You pay for those cards with tokens. And then you do actions that get you more cards, more tokens, and let you play more cards.
The better an engine you build, the better it runs.
Yeah. And if I do have to say, my one qualm with this game is, in terms of the UI design, the type of nest on the cards, it was not reflected in the cards that referenced that. Like, it would just have the term for the nest, but it wouldn't have the picture.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And so the picture didn't necessarily match up with the terms because we don't know what those nests are in.
I'm trying to think of where else that really showed up, because it shows up in the per round bonus scoring, and there they just use the picture.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a few times in the rule book that it's referenced as a certain type of nest, but I think there's a key somewhere, but it's not like every time they mention that nest type, you don't see the picture that reflects it.
Yeah, I do remember us having some problems during actual session. But you mentioned the round card. What did you think about this game having 4 rounds, and what did you think about each round having a different goal?
So I do like that, and I've seen other games like this that have that per round scoring with different goals in each round, and I think it's a mechanic that really brings out replayability in the game.
You mean because it's different each time?
Yes, because each time you play this game, where in round 1 you may be looking for eggs in a clutch nest, but the next game you play, that's round 4. And so it changes how you have to approach which cards you have in your hand, which ones you decide to play, which habitats you decide to activate. It's going to change all of that just by having those scoring rounds different every game.
Yeah, I did notice that this scorecard allows you to flip it. And so you can either play a non-competitive game or a competitive game. And the green side is, I think, more competitive than the blue side. I might have mixed that up. But one thing that I did like about it having multiple rounds is that over the course of the game, the number of actions you can take gets reduced because you take one of your action cubes and place it on the round card at the end of each round to indicate how many points you got. So you remove a cube, but throughout the course of the game, you're building stronger actions. So fewer actions, but better actions.
Yeah, so going into this game, I was a little... I don't think I've played a game before where you actually get fewer actions as the game progresses. If I have, it doesn't come to mind. But I thought that was very interesting in how, like, as the game progresses, you do get fewer actions. Now, because it's an engine builder, though, the actions you do take should be more productive later on. So you shouldn't need to take 2 of the same action to get the same effect. So I thought it was interesting, and I was curious how it played out. And I genuinely feel like you were still... The scale of action economy went up faster each round than losing 1 action. So from round 1 to 2, yes, I lost 1 action, but I probably gained more than double one of my action's efficiency in that round, if that makes sense.
And what was your engine built around, Nick?
So early on, I thought my engine was going to be built around just drawing a ton of cards to get a lot of birds into play in each of my habitats. But about halfway through round 1, I realized I had misinterpreted how one of the engine building mechanics worked. And that wasn't going to work for me, so I kind of had to scrap my plan completely. And by the end of the game, I was essentially in a egg-laying mode, like just getting all of the eggs and finding birds that could have as many eggs in their nest as possible to have those extra points at the end of the game. Because at the end of the game, both cards tucked underneath and eggs on the board were essentially 1 victory point apiece.
Yeah, and so were the round scores that you got at the end of each round.
Yep.
Was there anything else that added points? I think the number of food that you had placed on a bird if it consumed food.
Well, that was, again, like if that food is being placed into one of the habitats, basically anything in a habitat that isn't a bird scores you 1 victory point, and each of the birds have victory points on them as well. So it was interesting to see that there's a pretty wide variety of victory points on the birds themselves too. Anything from, I think there was a 1 or 2 cost one, up to bald eagle was like 7 or something crazy.
I thought the scores that we had at the end of the game were quite distant. I think it was a range of like, one person had 30 points, and I think you had about 100. So that was a large point difference, right?
I don't think it was that far apart.
I don't know. I thought it was pretty, when I noticed it, it was pretty diverse. Now, we only played with 3 players, and it was the first time everybody played the game, so maybe that was part of the reason I felt that way. But I don't know. It seemed like eggs at the end of the game counted for the most points if you had the bird slots associated with them. That was just me, though. I felt like I spent all my action just trying to place eggs at the end of the game.
Well, I did too, and I think that's sort of, we both had open egg space, and it was a single action that could net us, 4 or 5 victory points per action. Outside of actually playing another bird into your habitat, there's not a lot of other ways to get 4 or 5 victory points per action. So I think that's where, at least for both of us, because we had a decent egg-laying mechanic built into our engine, we could easily score the most points with that action.
Yeah, maybe it was just a perception. I'm just thinking about the action economy of playing a bird, which means that first you have to get food, so that's another action, and then you have to take an action to play the bird once you have the card. So you're trying to set up a lot of stuff just to play a bird, but once you have the bird out there, then you can just gain eggs and put them on the bird. So I don't know. I felt like maybe it was easier to do that, but you also had to jump through all those other hoops to actually have the bird out there.
Right. And you had to draw cards to have a bird in your hand to actually play into your habitat. So
that was the thing. And you could spend eggs as resources too.
You could.
That was maybe another reason that it felt so easy to get eggs, because you had to use them, consume them.
And that was something after we played, I was kind of curious if, and I'm curious to play this game a couple more times and see if, at least to me in this playthrough, eggs seemed like the most important resource that you could build your engine around. And I don't know if that's just because of how you and I kind of ended up with on similar strategies at the end of the game. I don't know if that's because we were both on that strategy and it seemed to be working well, or if it was just the cards we had or the randomness of it. I don't know. But that's where I'm curious to play it again and see if those eggs were one of the most important resources. Now, that being said, in the first round, and even the second round, part of the second round, the eggs weren't really that important because you had to use, I think, 2 eggs to make 1 food, or there was an inefficiency in there versus just taking the food action to get 1 food.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Nick. I didn't have a strategy. My goal was to just play water birds or birds that ate fish or something.
Yeah.
And I actually misread my card that I got at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, the bonus point score.
I thought it said I got extra points for each bird that I had that ate fish that had over 4 points as a point value.
Okay.
But I completely misunderstood that, and what I needed was a range of birds that eat fish. Sure. And then I got extra points if those fish had, if I got more than that range, I think.
Okay.
So I didn't get extra points for each bird. I just got points for meeting my goal. I got a flat stack of points.
So that was something else. Like you and the other person we were playing with both got at least partial points on your hidden objective. I got none.
And you still won.
But I still ended up winning the game. So I think some of that goes to, like, it is an engine builder, and those are bonus points that can help determine the winner. But if you build a really solid engine and you just... Sometimes your engine and the cards that you get don't end up cooperating with that special bonus point, secret objective thing that you get.
Well, speaking of the engine, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of player interaction in this game. How'd you feel about that?
I'm kind of okay with it. Because even when it wasn't my turn, I was trying to figure out what I could do. Like, there was enough think time, and we only had 3 players, so I think it was about right. 4 players might be okay too, but there's a 5th player option. I don't know if that's the best. But there was almost just enough time for me to sort of plan out my next turn while you two were both taking your turns. And granted, the board and the available cards can change between there, but I'm kind of slow on thinking more than 2 or 3 turns ahead, So I really had to concentrate on planning out how my machine was going to work, how my engine was going to run, and which steps I really needed to take next to make my engine run more efficiently.
Well, I noticed that the only way you could really interact with player was by limiting their food options.
Okay.
Because everybody rolls the dice into the bird feeder. So whenever they want to gain food, unless it's printed on a card, unless it says you gain this much food or a specific type of food, only way to get food is to take the gain food action and then gain food that is showing on a face-up die in a shared pool. And if there is no option for the food that you need, then you're out of luck.
Yep.
You have to do something else or make a different action. And now the other point of interaction was not a negative or in terms of harming to other players, but it actually was beneficial. So a lot of birds said if you take this action, then everybody gets a food. You just get one. Like everybody gains an invertebrate. And now that's actually a disadvantage for the player who's activating the action. Because if you play with more people,
and it isn't.
Then you give... Well, it's like in any other game. Whenever you give players something equal to the amount that you're getting, and all the players get it, that resource is now leveraged because they're all trying to beat you.
Yeah.
Right? So they're gaining way more percentage than you are.
You are giving your opponents an advantage, yes.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things you really have to pick and choose when you allow that to happen, I guess.
Yeah, if you really need that food, maybe you'll do it. But what you did get to choose in this game is if you wanted to activate an action, you didn't have to activate it. If it was your die was going to go over that bird, you could choose not to. What did you think about the theme in this game? So, and I'm not just talking about birds. I'm talking about like the overall aesthetic of each piece of material. So we already talked about the cards, but what do you think about the game board and the manuals?
I would say in terms of theme, we talked about it a little bit already. This is a very unique theme. I don't know of another game that has had a bird theme that's really more of an educational type theme to it. I think it's very unique. I think the overall quality of all of the materials is pretty fantastic. They did a lot of little things in this game that just make it feel fantastic. The rule books, I don't know if they are, but they feel almost like they're a linen-y material, and so do the cards. The little habitat boards that you use, when you close them up, they look like a journal that you would take into the field to, record which birds you see.
Yeah, that's right.
The card tray that comes with it comes with, I think they're called gamer trays, also a company out of St. Louis. And they're really nice, and I believe these are spaced out so you can even sleeve the cards and they go right back in here.
It even comes with a dice tower, right?
It does. The dice tower, unfortunately, is probably like the low point of quality in manufacturing. Just because it's a cardboard dice tower, it's fine. In any other game, it would be a fantastic quality. But I think in this game, because everything else is such high quality, it's the most lacking part of it. Not saying it's bad. Like, that's the thing we have to complain about in quality on this game is a cardboard dice tower that actually still looks really fantastic.
Well, they also gave us a lot of multicolored egg.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. It's super cool, but you probably could just use like a die to count those, or maybe some type of counter.
I think you could, but that would definitely take away from the aesthetic of the game too.
I agree.
And at the end of the game, it was kind of interesting to look around and see everybody's board and all of the cards that were tucked under your raptors that had eaten other birds, and all the eggs and the different nests scattered all over the board. And they're kind of this pastel plethora of colors, so it looks kind of neat too.
Well, and speaking of the theme, while it is very specific, it might not appeal to some people, even though it's a beautiful game. And in that interview I mentioned from More Games Please, I think Jamie said that they only printed about 10,000 copies of the game for the first print run because they weren't sure if it would appeal to people.
Yeah, so this game, like I said, has sort of become its own beast, and they drastically underestimated the demand for the game in the first couple print runs. And Jamie's been very public about sharing with consumers and retailers and everybody the kind of issues they've dealt with from day one with this game in terms of getting enough games to shelves to sell. And even to the point where there was a copy that I believe sold for almost $1,000 on eBay,
Wow.
The first week it was released.
Are you kidding me?
It was ridiculous. It was $900, $1,000, something stupid like that.
That's insane.
And we've had trouble getting this game in. This is the copy that we played. Actually, was one that I had opened up for our store to have a demo copy and be like, "Hey, if you want to try out this game, try it out. If you want to order one, I would recommend ordering it now, so the next time we get a print run, you can have one." Because they're just not available. I mean, that's just the unfortunate part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, did you have anything else to mention? I think we've covered most of the topics I thought of.
I mean, the primary thing I'll say about this game is it is really fantastic. I enjoyed playing it a lot more than I thought I would, and regardless of the theme, I think it's just a really good game.
Yeah.
I don't think the theme, as much as it is made a central part of this, if you just enjoy good mechanical games, good engine building games, you will definitely enjoy this.
Do you think there's any other games out there like this?
You know, I thought about that. We played almost a week ago now, and I tried to think of something similar-ish to it, and the closest thing I could come up with was Steampunk Rally.
Okay.
Just because that's another... You're building this engine with dice in that game to build better stuff and make your car go.
So you think people that like Steampunk Rally would also like this game?
Yeah, I mean, unless you like Steampunk Rally because you love steampunk, and that's the thing.
It's
Like,
pretty
if
awesome.
that's the reason you like that game, it's kind of a toss-up. But if you enjoy the engine building part of that, where you're rolling dice and you're moving dice and you're trading dice for other dice, that's the part of the engine building that I think you would enjoy in this game.
Yeah, this game reminds me of Race for the Galaxy.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm terrible at that game, but it's one, it's because I don't really care because the cards are ugly in that game. But there's also a lot of different things to read in that game. If you don't know how everything works together, you can really get behind. And I think maybe this game could feel a little bit like that. If you don't make right decisions at the beginning of the game, you're less likely to win at the end. But it's beautiful and it's fun to look at. And I did like the first time we played it.
So in most engine builders, I would agree with you that if you make a mistake early, it'll probably cost you in the end. But I feel like I made a huge mistake very early in our game, but I was able to recover from that even. Mm-hmm. And by simply switching that strategy, I was able to make a ridiculous comeback in late game and come out with a win. So
you might have won, Nick, and these stupid birds keep pooping on my car. Your bird, your aviary was bigger than mine, but these birds are still tasty, and I'm gonna keep eating them up.
I was just wondering if you're letting me win at this point, because I don't know.
Yeah, keep thinking that, Nick, because one of these days, you don't know, I might just stop letting you win, and I'll beat you when you least expect it, or when I get lucky.
I guess I didn't win last week, but I won this game.
Yeah, that's true. We just need better players than me to come in and take you out. All right, that's it for me, Nick.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I highly recommend it. If you get a chance to play, definitely check it out. It's not a game for everybody, but no game is. So,
all right, everybody. See you next week. thanks for listening to Makeshift Meeples. We really appreciate all of your support. If you like what you heard and you want to support the podcast, sharing it with a friend is a great way to help, and it's free. Or you can hook us up with a donation through the Anchor app. This is Tyler.